Amanda from Pontes Books here with the Chapter 30 Historical Tidbit for The Prince and the Pauper. Today's historical tidbit is about some of the people working for, I guess you could say, Edward, but for most of the story, actually Tom. Chapter 30 is not very long, so there's not a ton to pick from, but this was something that gets a mention and is mentioned throughout the story as well. So I decided this would be a good thing to focus on. So for chapter 30, we are focusing on the Yeomen of the Guard. So this is something that still exists modern day. So we'll kind of look at a brief overview of kind of the history of this famous group in England. So in The Prince and the Pauper, we don't see that term used specifically, but we do see mention of Edward. But again, it's Tom in this kind of scene at the moment, his guards. So it came to be a proud pleasure to march to dinner attended by a glittering procession of officers of state and gentlemen at arms, insomuch indeed that he doubled his guard of gentlemen at arms and made them 100. He liked to hear the bugles sounding down the long corridors and the distant voices responding, "Way for the king." So again, that's talking about the guards who are kind of watching Tom, and that it takes him some time, but actually when he gets used to it, he wants more. He hires more people to be a part of this guard. So in England, at least from the time of Henry VII, they were referred to, the king's like head security, personal bodyguards were referred to as the Yeomen of the Guard. So again, like who were they? This is the personal bodyguard or group of bodyguards of whoever the king and queen of England was at the time. So it was initially established, so there was always probably some sort of guard, but this particular name and position was created by King Henry VII in 1485. So he wanted to give some of his guards a more, I guess, permanent position that they could be in. And so he established this as an official thing. So originally, their job was mostly just being responsible for the king's safety, both at home and away, or on the battlefield. And originally, there are some different numbers by different accounts, but it seems like they started off with about 50. But within the time between Henry VII and Henry VIII, it could have, there was numbers that went up to, I think, like 200 at certain times. So the number varied a little bit. So some of their responsibilities, obviously everything revolved around kind of protection in one way, shape, or form. But to a certain extent, sometimes it was the king's comfort as well. And we'll get to that in some of these specific things. So they kind of lined the hallways whenever the king moved from one room to another. So that's kind of what we're seeing with Tom here in this scene, is that he has kind of this whole entourage that moves with him. So some other roles, they also carried torches for the king. And then they would also advise the officer of the kitchen about when to prepare the king's meals. So obviously that's not so much about protection, more about, keeping the king fed and comfortable. Additionally, they would monitor during meal times and kind of move throughout the whole room. Occasionally, they would also taste the king's food. So oftentimes there was someone with an official job of doing the tasting, but sometimes that fell under their responsibilities. Another one that I found interesting is that they would sometimes collect food and drink for the king at night. So kind of after meal times in the middle of the night, the king, especially King Henry VIII, we know he liked to eat, would sometimes want a little snack. So they would be responsible. I don't think they would do the actual delivering. I think there was a squire or some page or something. I don't remember exactly the name of the role that would actually deliver the food, but they would kind of, I guess, pick out the good stuff for him. They would also sometimes stab the mattress with a dagger to make sure that there wasn't anything in the mattress that I guess could do any harm to the king. When a king would pass away, or a queen, I keep saying king, but technically king or queen, as they spent a lot of time also working for Elizabeth I and now Elizabeth II. They would carry the royal coffin. and also would participate in royal ceremonies such as a royal coronation procession. So kind of modern day, but also back in the time, they are known for their uniforms. That's something that makes them stand out. So those uniforms are Tudor inspired. So you can see on the uniforms, there is some gold embroidery with a couple different symbols on it. So one is the Tudor rose, and then additionally a shamrock and a thistle, and the motto "Do et Mondroit." And now I am blanking. I looked up what that meant. It's like God and something about God. And I don't remember what it all means. And then the initials of whoever the current monarch is. So that was all on their uniform, a red tunic right now. So my understanding is that over time, the colors have changed. So I think at the time of King Henry VIII's coronation, I think they were green, I think. And also red knee breeches, stockings, a sword, and then often a long pole that can be seen in the picture that were commonly used as weapons kind of in those earlier Tudor times since they've been around. So yeah, that's a little bit about the Yeomen of the Guard. Hopefully you learned something. Have a good rest of your day.